Namaste and welcome back to today's episode of Mahabharata Matters. In the previous episode, we saw in his attempt to kidnap Draupadi, Jayadratha had been disgraced. The last few months of exile seemed to get longer and harder on all of them. Even Yudhiṣṭhira was getting restless. The only saving grace for them was the frequent visits from sage Markandeya. He visited them often and told them stories from the Puranas and Ramayana, etc. He spoke about great kings, pious saints, and many dharmic values too. This seemed to calm them down a little bit. To finish their last few months of exile, they had moved back to Dvaitavana. One day, while they were at their ashram, a Brahmin came running to them. He complained that a deer had taken away his arani on its antlers. Arani was an essential household item for the Brahmana as he needed it to make fire for his fire rituals and cooking as well. A deer had carried it away in its antlers and run away into the forest. He requested the Pandavas to go rescue that arani for him from the deer. All the 5 Pandavas started chasing in the direction the deer had run. They kept chasing the deer into the forest until it went out of sight and they went out of breath. They could not catch up with the deer. They were really distraught that they could not help the Brahmin. As a Kshatriya, it was their dharma to protect the Brahmin and get him what he wanted. They were all sad that their miseries kept coming relentlessly one after the other. Yudhiṣṭhira consoled them. He said troubles always came in clusters, never alone. They were all extremely thirsty now and couldn't move a foot. At that time, Yudhiṣṭhira asked Sahadeva to climb up on a tree and see if there was any body of water in their vicinity. Sahadeva did so. He found a beautiful placid lake very nearby. He said he would go and fetch water for all of them. When he got to the lake, he was so eager to get a sip of water first for himself. When he bent down to get a sip of water, he heard a voice. It said he was not allowed to drink water without answering his questions, or he would die. Sahadeva did not pay attention to the words. He took the sip of water anyway and instantly dropped dead on the bank of the pond. When Sahadeva did not return after a long time, Yudhiṣṭhira sent Nakula in search of Sahadeva. Nakula too, when was about to take the sip of water, heard the same voice. He too did not pay heed to the voice, took the sip of water and dropped dead by the lake. After a long time, when both of them did not return, Yudhiṣṭhira sent Arjuna in search of them. Arjuna was shocked to see both his brothers by the lake dead. But then his thirst was too much. He first thought he would take a sip of water. When he was about to drink the water, he too heard the same voice. It warned him not to drink without answering his questions. But Arjuna was too tired to listen to the voice. He too took a sip of water and dropped by the lake dead. After a long time, Yudhiṣṭhira sent Bhima in search of all the 3 brothers. Bhima was surprised too to see all his brothers lying by the side of the lake. But then he wanted to get a sip of water first. So when he bent down by the lake, he too heard the same voice, warning him not to drink without answering his questions. But as his brothers did, he ignored the voice and took the sip of water anyway. He dropped dead immediately as well. Yudhiṣṭhira was very perplexed. After a very long time, none of his brothers had returned. He started getting concerned. He came looking for them. He saw the pool all right, but right by the lake, he saw all his brothers motionless and dead. He could not believe it. His brothers were mightiest warriors in the world. There did not seem to be an intruder or any kind of power struggle. He could not believe that all his brothers had given up their life without even fighting for it. It did not seem normal. He started thinking because of his gambling he was being punished this way and all his brothers were being taken away from him. But why his brothers? Why not him? Many thoughts were reeling in his head, but the thirst was too intense for him to think straight. He thought he would first take a sip of water from the cool lake. He too heard the same voice, warning him not to take a sip of water from the lake without answering the questions. The voice said he was a yaksha and the lake belonged to him. Yudhiṣṭhira by now had understood that this was no ordinary yaksha. The Yaksha also said his brothers were foolish enough to not listen to him. Yudhiṣṭhira should not do the same mistake, he said. Yudhiṣṭhira obliged to answer the Yaksha's questions to the best of his knowledge. What were his questions and what were Yudhiṣṭhira's answers? We will see that in the next episode. So, what are our takeaways from this story? If it rains, it pours. Troubles come in groups. It sometimes seems that we did not get over one and the next trouble is already waiting for us, as if standing in queue one after the other. Instead of complaining about the troubles, the best way to deal with them is one at a time. Without thinking about the past perils or being anxious about the impending ones, we have to tackle one at a time, just like Yudhiṣṭhira did. Yudhiṣṭhira focused on answering the questions of the Yaksha rather than lamenting about his brothers. He had clearly understood that this was no ordinary Yaksha and it had to be some supernatural power if he could bring down all his 4 brothers without a struggle. He hence focused upon answering the questions alone. With these thoughts, we come to the end of today's episode. Remember, in this series we are discussing matters of Mahabharata because even today, Mahabharata matters. Hari Om.